y'all. Welcome to our South Georgia garden.
Come along with us as we tour our Bird Girl garden. In the fall of 2022, we purchased and moved to 10 acres on a lake here in South Georgia. We moved from the coast, from Skidaway Island, this 70 miles or so inland, and looking at this blank slate, except for the large oaks that you see there, we did not have any gardens. So we set forth to build our first garden underneath that large oak in the front yard. We brought with us a statue of Bird Girl, because who in the Savannah area doesn't have a statue of Bird Girl in a garden? So our first garden would be the Bird Girl garden. We'd purchased this Bird Girl statue several years ago when we lived in Rankin, Georgia, and had her in our garden there. Then we moved to Skidaway Island, Georgia, underneath live oaks and on the salt marsh, and of course took Bird Girl with us. And here is a picture of Bird Girl at our last house, a garden on Skidaway Island. Here she is surrounded by zinnias before we moved to our new property. And the fun began. Digging up sod, really pasture grass around that large oak, and deciding what shape our Bird Girl garden would take. We knew that Bird Girl would be the anchor of one end and the oak tree the anchor of the other end. So we removed the grass, put out some fresh mulch, and stood back and looked and said, does it look like a Bird Girl garden? Belinda and I both approved and agreed with each other, so we began planting. We dug into the fresh compost and mulch and began to plant. It doesn't look like much now because of the leaves on the ground in the fall, but we did put in some snapdragons, some nandina, and various other plants that would take shape and grow as the weather warmed up and we moved into spring. Oh, look at those snapdragons blooming now. We added some cannas and some other plants, and the Bird Girl garden began to burst into life. And here's a view of the Bird Girl garden in the shade of that large oak, with some red blooming around her and some other plants filling in. She's starting to grow, starting to expand, and looking pretty good. In July of 2024, we decided to expand the Bird Girl garden. We had a small Natchez crepe myrtle that we wanted to put at the far end to anchor that end opposite the large oak tree. We turned Bird Girl so she's facing the road and not the driveway. And on just past the Natchez anchor end, we placed a statue of a boy and girl reading. How appropriate for two retired educators to have boys and girls reading in their garden. In the fall of 2024, early fall, probably this is late July, we're looking at the expansion of Bird Girl garden. See some plants really expanding and taking shape and blooming, finding their space there in this garden. Some plants are going over, seeding out, and the leaves are beginning to fall. We come around and see Mahoney looks good, Carex is looking good, and the Vincas. Wow, how they love the South Georgia heat and humidity. They do so well for us. Coming along, you see some zinnias. The zinnias are actually given to us by cousin Lisa. She got them from her mother Cleta. She grows them in her own garden, and now we grow them in ours. And Aunt Cleta's zinnias look good. As they stretch toward, it looks like Bird Girl. Actually, they're leaning towards the setting sun, and there she is, the feature point of this garden, Bird Girl. We move on past that original part of this garden and see the new addition. Sunshine Ligustrums, flanking Jazz Hands Loropetalum. Some new azaleas ever blooming planted on each side of that. A Clarodendron, Java Glory Bower, transplanted from another place in our garden. lantana, barberries on the outside of abelias, circling natchez, and a newly planted plumbago with a candy corn spirea next to it, and some lemon coral sedum around the base of boy and girl. And as we move from the shade of that large oak, looking back down the bird girl garden, in early fall, we had no way of knowing that by the end of September, everything would change. Well, after Hurricane Debbie came through, and then Hurricane Helene with her strong winds, she blew right through our property, toppling over 8 oak trees, including the one anchoring the bird girl garden, destroying some plants, uprooting others. Hurricane Helene toppled that large oak in bird girl garden, roots and all. There you see that large oak laying facing the road. It took out power lines, took out plants, destroyed a good portion of that garden. But with that destruction comes sunny opportunities. Opportunities for new plantings, opportunities to see what we can grow in this now full sun garden. But before new planting can begin, cleanup has to begin. And there's the debris from that oak, having to be cleaned up, mulched, and used around plants. Not only mulch, but also the large limbs would provide edging around plants. So we decided mulching, using limbs, finding garden art, these parts of the oak tree would remain in our garden. In fact, we decided that the large logs from the oak tree would provide a centerpiece in this garden. The tree service, taking care of some of these trees for us, asked what did we want done with the debris. We explained we're using them in the garden. They asked, what do you want to do with the stumps? We decided the stumps would be placed back in their craters and we would use them as garden art. Now, what do you do with a stump of a majestic oak sitting in your front yard? Well, we thought about that and we decided it would be garden art, but what would it be? So we looked at the debris, removing it, trying to decide exactly what to do with it. We had it mulched, shredded, and scattered out throughout gardens. As you see the 2 logs laying there, the central point of this garden, this bird girl garden, knowing that we would expand the garden towards the house on that side of the large oaks. And we would use some of the mulch after we got rid of the sod that's there, the pasture grass. We looked at all of that debris and realized we could use it. Now you look above and you see the enlarged bird girl garden. And the idea of an eagle's nest on that stump. Well, how appropriate since we are graduates of Georgia Southern and the Georgia Southern Eagles are here in Statesboro. And the garden began to grow again, taking shape again. There once was a large oak tree where the stump now sits. The oak tree came down in the Hurricane Helene. Some of the plants in the area were damaged, but some weren't. These 2 Marvel Mahonias still stand, along with these caryxes that are here, some salvias. But we've decided to take the stump and let it stand, making it into what appears to be an eagle's nest, little garden art. On down this eagle nest end of this garden, we've also planted some poppies. They reseeded from last year. They're looking very good, putting on a fiery red display this spring. along with some other perennials, including some onions that Belinda planted. They're just green scallions that have been planted and have come up and are now providing ornamental display in the spring garden. We also have recently planted this little gem magnolia. It will take the place of that once mighty oak that stood here, but hopefully will not present any damage to structures in future hurricanes. Also, hopefully the little gem will withstand anything nature can throw at it, but it also is a beautiful floral display, as you can see it blooming right now. More ornamental onions. And then some primrose that have come back from last year. This entire garden is still called the Bird Girl Garden. And here she stands, Bird Girl. Behind her is the trunk of that once mighty oak where the eagle's nest is now perched. And it spans almost 3/4 the length of this garden. Following on down, we have a brilliant display of sunshine ligustrum, jazz hands, loropetalum, more sunshine ligustrum, some nepeta, catmint, and a newly planted, as of last spring, Natchez. This is our smallest Natchez on the property, and we would refer to her as Natalie. Around Natalie are some barberries, putting on their spring display of fiery red. And this end of the garden has a boy and a girl reading. The statue causes us to refer to this end of the garden as the boy-girl garden. Certainly they're reading possibly the story of the secret garden. Of course, this garden is no secret, as it is in our front yard. Moving on around, behind the boy and girl is a candy corn spirea, putting on her lovely display in spring. Behind her, circling Natalie, are abelias and some more bayberries. We have more nepeta, and some other plants waking up from their dormancy in the winter. A Kunti palm has been planted recently. We purchased that from the sale of the Georgia Southern Botanical Garden, flanked by some transplanted sunshine ligustrums. And here we have some transplanted salvias from another garden. Oh, I see that we have some bubblegum petunias coming back from last year. They survived the hurricane. Again, you can see the fallen tree. We had it cut and we're leaving it here as garden art and to remind us of the tree that once stood and provided beautiful shade in this area. Recently, we also planted an vitex or a chase tree, or as some people call it, Texas lilac. We will eventually fill this area of the garden. The wood chips came from the debris off this once mighty oak, along with the limbs that are providing a perimeter around this garden. One other addition is a new Natchez, much larger than Natalie. She was just planted a week ago, as was the little gem magnolia. So this is a garden, sits right in front of our house.
And when the poppies arrive each spring, it is a time of remembrance in our Bird Girl garden as we think of all the adventures we have had together.
Thanks for going along with us on a tour of our Bird Girl garden.
Cheers and happy gardening!